Two FBI agents, Thomas J. Baker and Nicole Parker, testified before the House Republicans, before the House. And the testimony was interesting on a number of fronts. Now, a lot of the focus was on Nicole Parker. She's a young woman. She's attractive. She was very emotional, at one point coming almost to tears. She spoke in a very interesting way about the two FBIs, and I'll come back to that. But as a result, the other guy, Thomas Baker, his testimony was a little bit sidelined, and there were important details that he revealed, because when we talk about the FBI the way it is now, one question is, what is the genealogy? What is the sort of origin? How did the FBI become this way? If the FBI has gone rogue, who made it rogue? And Thomas Baker offers a couple of important clues as to the answer. Not the full answer, but at least part of the answer. And the answer, as it turns out, goes back to 9/11. If we think of, in more recently, COVID as being a sort of dramatic event that changed the rules, was exploited by a lot of bad people, essentially Baker says the same thing happened with 9/11. The FBI was sort of taken by surprise. Apparently the president, George W. Bush, was very angry that this had gone undetected, that 9/11 had not been anticipated and blocked before it occurred. And so the FBI, under Robert Mueller, made two important changes. Number one, it began to centralize the FBI. So the FBI previously operated mainly through regional authority and regional field offices. I remember under Ronald Reagan, Louis Freeh, who was then the director of the FBI, would always emphasize the strength of the FBI is the fact that we've got a lot of kind of eyes and ears out there, and we trust our local offices to do the heavy lifting. Essentially, Washington, D.C. is a kind of nothing more than a sort of coordination mechanism that links these different regional FBI. So the power then is local and it's decentralized. Mueller changed that, and he created a centralized FBI. And of course, a centralized FBI is much easier to corrupt. I think this is what Obama realized later, which was, hey, listen, if you got all the power in one place, in Washington, D.C. at the top, then if you can kind of rot the fish at the head, you create a rotten FBI all the way down. Why? Because the local FBIs are just taking orders from the centralized office. The second point that was made by Baker, which I haven't thought about, but of course is a very obvious point, is that as a result of 9/11, the FBI began to coordinate more closely with the CIA. Now, the CIA is supposed to be operating only abroad and dealing with external or foreign threats. But of course, because the hijackers who came from abroad nevertheless came here, some of them, of course, had taken flight school lessons here, the idea was that the FBI and the CIA need to work in really close coordination to avert future terrorist attacks. But this, of course, meant that the line of distinction between working abroad and working at home becomes blurred, not to mention that the FBI began to take orders from the CIA. So this is a dangerous blurring between the foreign and the domestic. And so, again, fast forwarding to now, when the Biden people say that the greatest threat today doesn't come from abroad, it's not foreign terrorists, it's domestic terrorists, well, what that means is that the FBI and CIA can now coordinate against these so-called domestic threats. And so you have an FBI that, as a result of the, quote, reforms of 9/11, is now tailor-made for the left to take over, and is tailor-made for the left to deploy as a weapon, not against people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, not against the 9/11 terrorists, but against people like you and me, who are sort of painted with the same brush. So that was the significance of the Baker testimony. And I want to turn to Nicole Parker, because what she talks about is the fact, and it's almost like a follow-up to what Baker said. She said there are now really two FBIs. She doesn't deny that local agents can go rogue, but she says by and large the action in the FBI is being driven from Washington, D.C. And it was kind of heartbreaking to listen to her talk, because she's talking about, here you've got a woman who's obviously very dedicated, very patriotic. It seems like she's a Christian, and I say that because Debbie pointed this out to me. She concludes her testimony by saying, I'll pray for the FBI. And Debbie goes, That sounds like a Christian. That sounds like a Republican. That's how Republicans talk. And but nevertheless, she goes, look, the FBI over the 12 years I've been there has totally changed. It's changed its focus. It's changed its way of operating. It even seems to have changed its mission. And it's no longer going after the kind of people that I joined the FBI to help to bust, to help to catch in the act. The FBI is not interested in crooks. It's not interested in thugs. In fact, it's become an organization of thugs. It's interested in ideological opponents. It's essentially doing a sort of task for the left. It's become the police arm of the left, perhaps in somewhat similar to the way in which, for example, the black shirts became the police arm of Mussolini, or we can find similar analogs in other socialist and fascist countries. So it's a dangerous FBI. Here you've got two people, both retired now, and one guy having retired some time ago, Baker, but the other, Nicole Parker, very recently blowing the whistle on what has happened to the FBI.